Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Illustration Department podcast. My name is Giuseppe Castellano. In this podcast, I talk to folks in illustration, graphic design, publishing, animation, and other creative fields about their work, the lessons they've learned, and the bumps and bruises they've experienced along the way. Every 4 weeks, I'm sharing an episode from the archive. Here's my chat with Lane Smith, which was originally published in October of 2021. It's a good one, folks. I hope you enjoy it. Should we begin on Route 66? Should we begin in Tulsa? Should we talk about Dan Bowman?
Oh.
I mean, should we talk about Art Center?
Dan Boffman.
Oh, is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, but most people pronounce it Bauman or Bauman or Bowman. Probably Art Center is a good place to start. Well, probably you're right. Even before that, when I was in high school in Corona, California, I had a great art teacher, Dan Boffman. And
not to be confused with Dan Bowman. He's a totally other guy.
Totally other guy. He's the PE teacher across the quad. Yeah, you know, like probably most of your listeners, I was just a doodler, and it never occurred to me that doodling can take you places other than, you know, just doodling at home while you think about how you're going to make a living doing something else.
Right.
And when I was in high school, I had this great teacher, Dan Boffman, and he put me on the yearbook staff and got me jobs around town painting Christmas windows on the glass. And he was just a great sponsor of my talents, which looking back weren't that great, but I guess he saw something in me. And,
come on.
And so I was in his art class. And then towards the end of my senior year, he said, you should consider doing this full time as a illustrator. And I wasn't even sure you could do that or what it was.
Right.
But we were about an hour away from Pasadena, and he drove me to Art Center and got me an appointment with the counselor there. And I spoke to them, and I thought, this is pretty good. And then he also entered some of my drawings in a local art contest, and I won that, and I got a scholarship to go to a museum in Riverside, which was near Corona, and it was a life drawing class. So that was great, too, because then when it did come time to submit my portfolio to Art Center, I had all these fairly academic-looking sketches, nude sketches to go along with my goofy drawings. And so my portfolio looked probably more rounded out than it should have. And I got into Art Center, and then that was an eye opener. I'm sure a lot of your other guests have talked about how they felt like they were probably pretty good artists, and then they got to their art school. And in my case, you know, I was the worst artist there. Everyone there was amazing.
Well,
That's every hot shot is, I'm sure it just immediately slaps you down, you know, to the lowest peg.
Yeah. That happened to me. Shoot. Are you kidding? I mean, I felt like I'd won awards in high school. I think in our yearbook, I was one of the, you know, most artistically inclined or whatever the heck that designation was. And, you know, went to RISD and thinking I was some kind of hot shit, and immediately fell off that stage. So it's
Well, I went to school in the 80s and the late 70s, and fortunately that's when all the clubs in LA, the punk rock clubs, were going full steam. So for 2 or 3 years at Art Center, I was just the guy that drew squirrely little stick figures and everything. But then suddenly I was like the new wave kid. You know, people could label my work as, he kind of does that punk art. And so that saved me. And I had one great teacher at Art Center, Brian Birch, who, you know, I was in a class filled with these hotshot renderers who could do these amazing airbrush paintings. This is how far back it was, pre-computers. They were working with airbrushes. But he pulled up my little, punky stick figure, goofy drawing and said, "This is what you guys should be doing." And it just kind of blew my mind that I'm sure he was just making an example to shame the other students to loosen up. But for me, it just hit me. And I finally, at that point, I realized maybe I do have something to offer that's a little different. And from then on, it was full steam ahead, and I got this confidence I never had before, and started actually showing my work around LA before I had even graduated, to album cover places and to magazines and to the LA Weekly newspapers, started getting stuff printed.
Well, how did you find these folks? I mean, did you have help figuring out who to call? I mean, back then it wasn't like follow them on Instagram. You had to actually call them or see them.
Yeah, it was just these fortuitous events. I remember I was at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and I was seeing the group The Dickies, who were sort of the West Coast version of the Ramones, I guess you would, if anyone would try to come up with a label for them. And, and then during the break of their set, I was talking to one of the band members. His name was Stan Lee, but he wasn't that Stan Lee.
Not that one.
And I just offered my services. Hey, if you guys ever need an album cover. And he said, yeah, actually we do. And so that was my first gig. And then I would meet, I met a guy, Bruce Kalberg, who said he had a magazine called No Mag. It was a punk magazine, and I offered my services to him. So really it was not about the money. It was just about getting stuff printed and building up a portfolio.
Sure.
I did stuff for LA Reader and LA Weekly. I think they had a drop-off policy and dropped my work off. And I think they only paid something like $20 for an illustration in black and white. But,
it's not much more than that now. No, I'm kidding.
I'm sure it's not. But, no, it's, you're right. Now I'm sure it's all done through submitting your stuff online to these places. But back then, you would drop off your portfolio, or if you were lucky enough to see an art director, they'd invite you in and you could chat. Yeah. And I think that was helpful to a guy like me because my stuff wasn't that great, but they had to look me in the eye and turn me down. And I think a lot of them felt sorry for me. They would, it's not like now where you could just send them stuff and it's easy for them just to click a rejection. Back then they had to tell you to your face, we'll keep an eye out for, a job that would be, but I would just say, well, don't you have anything? Well, we have this little spot, but you wouldn't want to do that. I'll do it.
It's like they're throwing this, they're just like, feeling pity for this Okie, and they're feeling like, let's throw this Okie a bone here.
That's exactly it.
How did you hook up with Oingo Boingo of all bands?
That was
weird science fame for folks who are like, who's Oingo Boingo? Led by Danny Elfman, by the way. Danny
Elfman, who would have predicted, he'd go on to be one of the greatest composers working in Hollywood. That was just a drop off to A&M Records, or I think, or maybe they were on IRS, one of those. Mm-hmm. I just dropped my portfolio off, and they called me in. I got the gig, which was a little intimidating because Georganne and Deen, an amazing illustrator from back in the day, did their previous covers, most of them. Mm-hmm. And, she was, I loved her work. So I did a cover that I spent probably a full month working on. And then they called me in, and they brought me into a conference room with Danny Elfman and the art director and the designer, and he didn't like it. Uh-huh. I don't even remember what the problem was. They they were threatening to, go with someone else. And they said, unless you could do kind of what we're talking about in the next couple days. And I said, I can do it. So the cover they eventually accepted was one that I did in like a day and a half, an oil painting, after I'd spent a month doing this other, what I thought was a fabulous cover that they rejected. But when I look back on that cover, I really didn't know how to paint. I look at it now, I'm a little embarrassed by it. And the problem Elfman had with the first cover, I recall, was he said I was mixing too many genres, because I would have sort of a realistic part of the painting and then something that looked like it was out of a, Japanese comic book over here, and then a little collage area. He said, you can't just mix and match stuff like that. It's got to be consistent. But I'll bet if he saw it now, he'd probably say, oh, yeah, I see what you were doing. That was pretty good. But he was looking for just more of just a sort of an illustration. But I really didn't have enough time on it. And then the funny thing, and this is how the record company works, or worked back then, I never got the artwork back, because they said, well, the record company owns your artwork. But probably 5 years later, I was at a party in the Hollywood Hills, and we had mutual friends. Said, hey, we're going to this party. And I'm at this guy's house who was a record producer. I look on his wall, and he had my painting hanging up on his wall. The original, that Oingo Boingo. I was like, hey, that's my painting.
Which album was it?
It was called,
was it
Good for Your Soul.
Oh,
no,
okay.
Good for Your Soul. And it was, yeah. And that was also fun, too, because I was still in school when that came out. And I remember listening to, I think it was K-Rock or one of the new wave stations back then. And they were talking about my artwork on the station. Like, hey, we just got the new Oingo Boingo. And they were seeing all this stuff in the artwork. And if you look in the background, you could see these shapes, like these monsters. And I had no idea what they were talking about. It was all this stuff that I didn't put in the painting. I didn't know. It was just some texture of mine that they were reading all this second and third read.
That's incredible.
Yeah, but it was just thrilling to have someone talk about your work when the day before you were just trying to get your homework in on time. And so and I was working at Disneyland at the same time as a custodial host. So I was a janitor at Disneyland. I'm trying to get my homework done at Art Center, and I got a couple of pieces out there.
That's
so
incredible.
I was a hard worker. Yeah.
Did you stay in contact with Dan Bofman?
I did for a number of years, and my first children's book I ever did, I dedicated to him. And
Halloween ABC.
And that's good. You know your stuff. That was the first book I illustrated, but the first book I wrote and illustrated was actually a wordless book, Flying Jake. And it's long out of print. So I didn't really write it. It was wordless, but so yeah, he's still out there, and I occasionally will hear from people who ask about him, who are also students of his, and who he mentored along the way. But I think he sort of became reclusive, and I understand he works with horses, and he's worse than me. He's out on a farm in California and doesn't answer his phone, and so, yeah, I would like to see him again. If he hears this, which is highly unlikely, Dan, send me a carrier pigeon message or something.
All right, so then you end up in New York after that.
Yeah.
Illustrating for magazines. It's same kind of deal. I mean, you're just kind of walking around showing your portfolio to folks. This is the 80s now, so,
Right. This was 84, and I had been living with my parents. I never left home. So I graduated from Art Center, and then I had several months to build up this portfolio then of these little published spot illustrations and a couple of album covers and from California places. And I came downstairs, was having my Fruit Loops, and told my mom, "Mom, I'm moving to New York, just like John Boy on the Waltons." And I was lucky because one of my huge inspirations was a fellow illustrator from Art Center named Matt Mahurin. Did you know his work?
I don't.
He was a guy who graduated Art Center the semester before me, came to New York and got the cover of Time magazine. And then he segued into photography, and you open up any issue of Rolling Stone back then, and it was his photograph. And then he segued into videos, and he directed videos for everyone you could think of, U2 and Metallica and Tracy Chapman and Bette Midler, and he was an illustrator. But he was living in New York. He says, "Lane, you got to come out to New York." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "You could sleep on my floor, and I've got a mattress." And so I came to New York, and I think I had about $1,000 with me. I had no checking account. I had no credit. I lived at home my whole life, and it was just so. I stayed with Matt, and he just showed me everything you needed to know. Now, what you want to do is you want to drop off your portfolio, and here's a list of magazines and places, and the drop-off day is usually Wednesday. What I do, he would say, is I have 2 portfolios, because since it's the same drop-off day, you could drop off at Esquire, and then you could drop off at the New York Times, so you get 2 out of so he was just great. And I would also watch him work, and he would be, back then you would do an illustration, and you'd call a messenger, and they'd deliver it uptown to the magazine, and he would do a piece for the New York Times, and he would literally be working on it when the front door buzzer would go off, and he'd say, "Lane, get the buzzer." And then he'd pull out his blow dryer, and he'd be blow drying the paint, trying to get it to dry. And he'd throw me an envelope, and he'd say, "Address this to, Steve Heller and Book Review." And the messenger would come, and then he would stuff it in the envelope, and he'd seal it and hand it to the guy. I'd say, "Well, wait, let me look at it." And I'd look at it. "Oh my God, this is gorgeous. You just did this?" And he'd say, "Well, no, I was working on it all night, but yeah, I just finished it." And "Oh, you're amazing." And so that was, another great mentor of mine, just to see the ambition and the drive of this guy.
Right.
Some other fellow classmates of mine were there too, like Greg Spalenka and Sue Steinberg and Mark Pemberthy, a lot of people I had gone to school with. So I had friends there, so I wasn't completely alone for the first time. So I had sort of a family. Yeah. And so that's kind of how I did it. And then my very first day there, I dropped off at the New York Times, and I got a spot illustration on the op-ed page. The art director at the time was Jarell Krause, and she gave me a little spot and said it was due the next day. So I went home and drew it, and I couldn't afford a messenger, so I hopped on the subway and gave it to her, and then she gave me another one for the next day. I think I did 3 days in a row. And then finally she said, "Oh, let's give someone else a chance. You're done."
You're like, no, I can do a 4th though. I'm still good.
Yeah. Right.
At some point, maybe one day, I'll have Stephen Heller on the podcast. And one of the questions I want to ask him is, how many pieces arrive on your desk still wet or reeking from fixative?
Fixative, yeah. Crystal clear.
Crystal clear. That's it.
I mean, he had to
wear a mask just to not pass out from all the fumes from all the freshly fixed work that he received. So, all right. So all the while, the idea of being a children's book illustrator was there. You worked at night on the Halloween book, just creating Halloween pieces, not really writing anything, just creating scenes. And it ultimately made its way onto a publisher's desk. Like Macmillan took a chance on you, and they just looked at the art and said, "Yeah, let's put this together as a book," and then hired the author to write to the work. And that's not really that normal.
No. The other thing that was not normal was just wanting to do children's books back then. I mean, at Art Center, they didn't even teach children's books. So I had to, in addition to, working at Disneyland, going to Art Center, then I signed up for a course at Otis Parsons in L.A., and they had a course taught by Barbara Botner, who's a great children's book writer.
Yeah.
She was teaching a course, and so I went over there to learn the basics of kids' books. It must have been on a weekend for me to squeeze it into my schedule. But I remember sitting in the library at Art Center and looking at children's books and looking at annuals, and that's when I thought, wow, I think this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And also when even though I graduated from school, and I'm telling you, I was a terrible painter. In school, I was doing a lot of pen and ink stuff, and just based on that Oingo Boingo cover and a couple of full-color painted things that I had done, I knew, and watching Matt Mahurin and all these other really great painters were. Oh, and I also went to school with Thomas Kincaid, the painter of light.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Not too bad.
Just seeing, TM. So seeing their work, I thought I really have to step up my game. So at night, I was taking my portfolio out in the day, but at night I was learning how to paint. So I would do these paintings. So I thought, I'll pick a different letter of the alphabet and try to render that every couple nights. And I made them all of a Halloween theme. And then when I finally had the completed alphabet, I took that around. It was at Sport Magazine. There was an art director there, Louise White, and she said, I have a friend at Macmillan. You could show these to. And the person she sent me to wasn't involved in children's books, but then she sent me to someone else, and she sent me to someone else.
Right.
And eventually my stuff ended up with a great art director there, Cecilia Young. Oh, yeah. And she looked at him. Yeah, have you met her? She was her. Mm-hmm. Oh, my God, yeah, she was the first one to hire me. She saw that work, and she took it to an editor there, Beverly Reingold, and they said, yeah, we think this could be a kid's book, but it needs text. Or would you be averse to us adding text or whatever? And I'm like, no.
Do whatever you want. Just hit print on the damn thing.
Exactly. So, yeah, they brought in Eve Merriam, who by that time had published hundreds of books. Nice. And a sidebar, she was married to Waldo Salt, who was a screenwriter who did Coming Home and Midnight Cowboy. It's kind of cool. Yep. Yeah, so she wrote poems for my around my paintings, and then some poems she came up with for her own letter. So then I had to throw out, my original V and put in. I think I had a vampire, and she wrote a poem about a viper, which was 100 times better than some. So. Yeah, so we came out with my first book was Halloween ABC, and that was also my entree to the way seeing Murphy's Law, because that was a Halloween book, and that year there was a strike at the printer in China, and so my Halloween book came out in November. So it's like, hey, you missed Halloween. Oh,
publishing. That stuff happens all the time. You mentioned Barbara Botner. I'm sure you're familiar with Peggy Rathmann. I love Peggy Rathmann. Yeah, Goodnight Gorilla fame. Also lives in California. She was having a tough time of things before, getting on with her career. I think she was in her late 30s. And the way she described it was that she was basically sleeping on her parents' couch, feeling, her words, prepared to die. And then at the suggestion of this fellow by the name of Barry Salzberg, she took a class, a children's book class with Barbara Botner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, Botner was, obviously, Botner was impressed with her. I think Botner wrote a book, or Botner offered to sell Peggy's first book.
Well, later, didn't they collaborate on Bootsy Barker Bites or something like that. I think later, much later.
I mean, the theme here, it seems like, is it kind of takes one person. You know, Botner believed in her and helped her get her first book published, Ruby the Copycat, and then her career was launched. You know, it's wild how that works.
I would say, you know, Goodnight Gorilla is, you know, if not the top 10, you know, one of the greatest kids books ever created. I was just looking at that again the other day, and it made me wistful that we don't have more Peggy Rathmann books.
I know.
She hasn't done anything in a while, and she's one of the greatest.
I know. That's another story for another time, I think. Speaking of stories.
Yes.
Lane. Not to be confused, by the way, with Lane Smith, the actor.
I am confused with Lane Smith, the actor, a lot. I used to get his mail in New York.
Oh, get out of here. Really?
Yeah, there was a time when he played Nixon on TV. I can't remember if it was a series or a one-off, but I would get all this hate mail. How dare you portray Richard Nixon? Isn't that funny?
God.
One time a guy called, and my wife answered, and he said, "Hey, is Lane there?" And she thought it was one of my relatives from Oklahoma.
Yeah, because he's from Tennessee or someplace.
Yeah. And she said, he's not in here. Well, I know you're probably protecting him. Just tell him it's Old Red, and I haven't talked to him in maybe 60 years. And she said, well, my husband's not that old. Well, is this Lane Smith, the actor? No, this is Lane Smith, the illustrator. Again, I know you're trying to protect him. Just tell him it's Old Red. But yeah.
Well, I have to share something with you before we get to the next question.
Okay.
It is that I he's confusing you with Lane Smith, the actor. When I first learned of you in the 90s in art school, I thought you were a woman.
Oh, a lot of people do. Yeah.
Because I even texted a friend of mine today and said, hey, I'm going to interview Lane Smith. This person wrote, I love her books.
It could be because I've never used an author photo, and I'm not on any social media. And then when I started doing books with John Sheska, we would go out together, and people always assumed we were a couple.
Well, you are in a way. Yeah, you are in a way.
We are in a way. Yeah.
Well, that's my next question. So I have I talk to illustrators all day long, and a mentee of mine was approached by an author to create 3 finished illustrations for free so that the author could then include them in her pitch to a publisher. There are a lot of red flags in what I just said. 1, you're working for free. 2, chances are slim that the publisher would say, hey, we'd like to acquire your book, and sure, we'll go ahead and use the illustrator you used. That doesn't happen. But that's more or less how it happened with you and John Sheska with the true story of the 3 little pigs.
First off, kudos for pronouncing Sheska correctly.
Thank you. I usually mispronounce names. That's my thing. So good on me on that. Yeah. And it was rejected. I mean, I doing research for this. It was rejected a lot.
Yeah. John
Sheska said that one common word used in the rejections was sophisticated, as in it's too sophisticated.
Yeah.
That bothers
Crazy.
me. Yes.
Well, it's not a concern any longer because if I'm sure, as you know, we're living in this amazing golden age now of children's books. And, every kid's book out there now is sophisticated and beautifully done and with access to 100 years of children's book art that they could bring up on Pinterest or whatever and reference. And, it's just so smart and so good. But when John and I were starting out in, oh my gosh, the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was an uphill climb. And John was teaching third grade in Manhattan at a place called the Day School.
Mm-hmm.
I did a couple of those early kids books, Halloween ABC,
mm-hmm.
and I was working, still doing a lot of editorial work, but our wives worked together.
Where?
Molly, they were at Sport Magazine, and then later Molly went on to work at Sports Illustrated and Business Week. But at the time, she was with John's wife, Jerry, and Jerry, I think just during casual conversation, she said, my husband wants to get into kids' books too, but he just can't get a toehold in. So Molly came home and said, you should read John's stuff, Jerry's husband. I'm like, I don't want to read his stuff. My dentist just had me reading his stuff last week.
I mean, if you're an illustrator, if you say to anybody as an illustrator, I'm an illustrator, I mean, one of the first questions you get back is, can you illustrate my book? Yeah.
It would be the same as living in Hollywood and, your cab driver says, I wrote a screenplay. So I, sunk in my drawing chair. Oh God, now I got to read this guy's stuff. But I read The True Story of the Three Little Pigs. Thought it was great. I read various stories which would later become The Stinky Cheese Man. Thought those were great.
Mm-hmm.
He had a couple of other stories that he was working with an illustrator on that weren't quite working out, which he never published. But anyway, and then we met and we all went out, and I just love the guy. He's just happy-go-lucky John Shuska. So I said, leave it to me, kid. I've got a couple of books out. I'll make what they call a book dummy, and I'll take it around. And so how many people have rejected you? And he said, well, everybody. I said, don't worry. Have you seen anyone in person? No, I've just been sending it through the mail. Oh, okay, yeah. That's your first mistake. I'll meet him in person. We'll get this published. So then I took it around with a book dummy, including one or two finished oil paintings. This was for The True Story of the Three Little Pigs, which was at that time was called The Tale of a Wolf, or A Tale of a Wolf. Mm-hmm. And everybody hated it. And I couldn't get it published either. They said, oh my God, this story is, it's too much of a parody. It's not just a funny story. It's satire. And then your work, it's so dark. This is not good for kids' books. Maybe it works in a Halloween alphabet book, but not for a fairy tale. So it was tough going until I finally went to Viking, and I saw an editor there, Regina Hayes, and she was, she's world famous. Worked with James Marshall and Bemelmans, and so she was behind her desk, and she said, "Well, let me read this." And I said, "Okay, well, I could come back next." No, I'll read it right now. What, in front of me? And she said, yeah, just sit right there. Let me read it. So she's reading it and turning the pages silently, And then she gets about page 4 or 5, and she's like, and I'm thinking, wait, is she laughing? This is crazy. Mm-hmm. And then she turned another page. She's like, and then she just closed the book and looked at my paintings. Oh yeah, these are pretty good. And then she said, I think we could probably do this. And I just about fell out of my chair. And then I this was before cell phones. I ran down to the lobby. I got on a payphone, and I called Shuska, and I said, I think I just sold our book. So John, unlike me, I'm reclusive and shy, and it's hard to talk to people. John is just this wonderful, gregarious guy. Everyone who meets him, just wants to be his pal. And, he called her the next day and, hey, is Regina? Hey there, John Shuska. Just wanted to follow up on that. She's in a meeting. And I think it was about 3.5 weeks before he can finally get through to anyone there. Right. And he was starting to question me, like, are you sure she said she had published this? Right. I said, I think so. I don't know. And sure enough, we finally, one day he got her. And she said, yeah, why don't you boys come in and we'll discuss this. And we came in, and neither of us had an agent or anything. And we were just thrilled that she wanted to publish it. And she said, yeah, we'll publish this. And she did.
This podcast is produced by the Illustration Department, a global leader in online education for illustrators. Visit illustrationdept.com for offerings like mentorships and portfolio reviews, testimonials, our alumni showcase, our best-selling Substack, and more. That's illustrationdept.com. And now, back to our conversation. They didn't say, like, oh, we're going to print 100,000 copies. You guys are going to be stars. I mean, they printed a small print run, and it sold out. And then they printed a larger print run, and that also sold out. So, And
that's exactly.
Fast forward 30-plus years, and you've illustrated... I can't even. I was trying to count it, and I kept losing count because I was like, oh, I think I got it. And then there's another book. Oh, I have to add that one. So, let's just say dozens and dozens of beloved, award-winning, fabulous books.
Oh,
it's true.
Yeah.
Here's the. So I'm just saying that just so we don't, because like if we talk, I do want to talk about every single book, but if we do, we'll be here till next year. And I want to get to this point, and that is kid friendly. So you're saying that rejections, these are too sophisticated, too dark, and that to me sounds like this isn't kid friendly enough. And that's one of the terms. Kid friendly is one of those terms. I think it's one of the worst things you can say when working on a picture book. What does it even mean? I mean, really? You know, like I took my kids to the 9/11 memorial. Is that kid friendly?
Right.
We took them to the Met a lot.
Yeah.
Is the Impressionist wing kid friendly? I mean, kids are complex, curious, and continually fascinated people.
Well, that is an excellent point. And I think I say on my facts page or somewhere on my website, people will often write me and say, and then you get this a lot too, when you do book signings, what's the age limit on this? And would this be appropriate for my kid, do you think? And I say, I don't know your kid. All kids are not alike. And I remember when I did It's a Book, and I had some teachers wagging their fingers at me saying, this is inappropriate for my classroom. And I said, I didn't make it for your classroom. I just made it because I liked it, and I hope it will appeal to kids like I was when I was a kid. And then those are the people who found it. I don't get that whole thing of that every book you do should be kid-friendly and for every kid in America. I mean, I grew up reading, Edward Gorey books, and probably half of the class, 2/3 of the class would find that stuff too odd and weird. Mm-hmm. But for the weird kids in the class, it was gravy, it was golden. Mm-hmm. So there's probably even more so now, with Goodreads and Twitter and all that, and probably that kid-friendly term gets bandied about a lot more than it ever has. And I just don't get it. When I first started collecting children's books, all my favorite books were things that I found in the budget bin, and they were usually European imports. And I'd say, oh my God, 99 cents, this book is great. And it'd be by someone like Józef Wilkoń, kid-friendly.
Yeah, I mean, like, is Tomi Ungerer's work kid-friendly?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Yeah. It's friendly. It's for this kid. That stuff was great. And a lot of Maurice Sendak stuff. I mean, my favorite illustrators are the Provensens, Alice and Martin Provensen. Mm-hmm. I guess you could say that it's kid-friendly in that the colors are bright and whatnot, but that stuff is so textural and so rough and coarse in the surfaces they acquire. That's what I loved about it, but I'm sure you would show it to some people and they'd say, it's kind of messy.
Yeah.
Or Ralph Steadman did kids' books,
you know? Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're like, they look at Ralph Steadman and probably say something like, is this a sketch? When will the final come in? Because the lines are really scribbly.
Wait, let me tell you a quick sidebar.
Please.
When I lived in New York years ago, mine and Molly's apartment was right above Books of Wonder.
Oh wow! And I had Peter Glassman on the podcast a year ago.
Oh yeah, he was one of our first supporters. But I remember coming home from dinner late one night, and Molly and I, and it was like something out of Night of the Living Dead. We saw all these people slowly walking with open books, just walking on the street. And they weren't reading them. They just had open books.
Just like hordes of them, some of them getting hit by cars, other ones, just falling through manholes and stuff.
Right. We passed one, and I thought that was weird. And then, a couple steps later, we'd pass someone else, and two or three, and they all had these open books. Finally, we get home, we're ready to go upstairs, and I peek into Books of Wonder, and Ralph Steadman's in there, and he's signing books for people, but in wet ink and just splattering it all over the place. And so people had these, these beautifully signed Steadman books, but the ink, would take 5 minutes to dry, so they were walking out of the store with their pages open.
Incredible.
It was like something out of a Boonwell movie, like, ooh, these zombies.
About the Provensens and style.
Yeah.
Before we get to style, Alice and Martin Provensen are definitely favorites of mine. I mean, who are they not favorites of, But there's this really, I don't know if a lot of folks know this. Maybe they do. I don't know. But it's a fun historical snippet. Every time I go to the supermarket, I think of, and I go through down the cereal aisle because I have 3 children and they eat cereal like they breathe. Martin Provensen designed Tony the Tiger. Well, the original Tony the Tiger. And the way the story goes, so there's another artist, Eugene Kolke, and there's this art director at Leo Burnett. The art director's name is Edward Kern. So anyway, they team up and they design a tiger named Tony for Kellogg's. They hire Martin to essentially finish off the overall design. And Martin's Tony beats these other ideas for a mascot for Kellogg's. And the other mascots are, and I'm not making any of this up, Katie the kangaroo, Elmo the elephant, and Newt the gnu. And then,
I like that.
And in later years, Tony the Tiger was given a son, Tony Jr. And oddly, and this is something that I particularly like as an Italian-American, an Italian-American mother. So Tony the Tiger has some Italian in him. Anyways, and then he also has a wife, Mrs. Tony. That's her name, Mrs. Tony.
You're kidding.
Nope. And they have a daughter named Antoinette.
So who created this whole backstory?
I guess the folks over at Leo Burnett, the advertising agency, I guess, or Kellogg's,
but
or some combination of the two.
Did they appear on the boxes ever? This extended family?
I don't know. I didn't look it up. I should have, because I don't remember any of this. I just remember Tony the Tiger.
No.
Yeah. Anyways.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah.
I knew that he drew him, but I didn't know the whole story. And the trivia question: who did the voice of Tony the Tiger?
Oh, was that Mel? It's not Mel Blanc or who is it?
No, it was Thurl Ravenscroft, who also did the singing voice of the Grinch. Boris Karloff did the speaking voice. This is great nerd trivia. And he also did a lot of the voices in the Haunted Mansion and the Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff.
Well,
Ravenscroft.
Let's take that further. So you just mentioned the Grinch. You did some concept designs for oh God, his name's going to jump right out of my head. Ron
Howard.
Thank you. Ron Howard's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. How did you get that gig?
Oh,
because like you were pretty deep in children's books by this point.
Right. And it was published by then. I did a posthumous Dr. Seuss book, Hooray for Diffin' Day. It was the last book he was working on when he died. He had about half of it finished. So Jack Prelutsky wrote the text, finished the text, and I did the illustrations, and my wife designed it, Molly Leach, and we were able to include all of Seuss's original drawings that he had planned for the book, blah, blah, blah. Right. So that book came out, and then by then I did have an agent. The agent at that time was a guy named Michael Siegel, who was actually more of a Hollywood agent, and he represents people like Bill Joyce, more like people who transition into movie stuff.
Sure.
And I don't know, that came across his desk that they were looking for a conceptual designer for the Grinch movie. I was working on another movie at the time, and I didn't, I just didn't have time for it. And I didn't quite think it was a good idea to do a live action version of the Grinch too. But he said, well, Ron Howard would like to meet you and take you to lunch. So, I met him up at the Brill building in Midtown where he was mixing a movie, Ed TV. And he said, hey, let's go to lunch. And so we go to lunch, and we go to this cheap little diner across the street. And I love the guy the minute I sat down with him because he ordered a Salisbury steak. And we immediately bonded because we were both Okies, and my dad was having heart problems, and his mom was having heart problems, and they were both in Oklahoma. And I remember his dad, Rance Howard, from old episodes of Gunsmoke, and Clint Howard from Gentle Ben. I got my Gentle Ben Big Little book right here behind me. And so, yeah, I said I'm good at doing characters and things. I'm not sure I would be good to work on this film to design sets and all that. I don't know anything about it. And and he said, well, we want to have a Grinch mobile. Could you design a Grinch mobile? No, that's not what I do. And so I think I did about 10 illustrations. They weren't very good. My heart just wasn't in it. But I love Dr. Seuss, and I love the Grinch, and I love the Chuck Jones version of the Grinch, but I sort of asked if I could be excused from the picture after a while, and I don't even know if I got a credit in that movie.
Just going to ask you where you credited. We'll look.
Yeah, it's probably buried in there, and but I was at the time, John and I were trying to do a Stinky Cheeseman movie, and we were at Paramount working on that, and so I just didn't have the time for it. And
was that the other movie that you were working on?
Yeah. Okay. So that was we were at Paramount Nickelodeon for a couple of years, then we were at Universal, and now Netflix has the rights to Stinky and Three Pigs, but we're not in. We're just sort of executive producers, but we're not rolling up our sleeves, and because I'm too old now,
Yeah,
so.
I hear you. We mentioned your wife and partner, Molly Leach. She's designed almost every book you've created. You said she makes everything you do 100 times better. But since most people don't know what a designer does, you're the one who unfairly usually gets all the credit. The picture book designer, that's a unique profession in that respect. In most cases, a picture book designer is also an art director. So like the person who makes suggestions on your composition and pacing and details and that. A good art director helps illustrators tap into their best artistic selves. That's as boiled down as I can sort of describe what an art director does, being a former art director. I used to speak at a lot of conferences, and in describing what an art director does, I would ask the audience to raise their hands as high as possible, and they would all raise their hands. And then I'd say, okay, well, now raise that hand that's in the air 1 inch higher. And then they would all raise their hand 1 inch higher. And then I would say, that's what an art director does with an illustrator. Like, that's what a good art director can do for an illustrator. So it's interesting that designers and art directors, even ones that were that have been literally described as, quote, groundbreaking, as your wife with her designs, don't seem to receive fair credit for the role in the illustration's success.
Yeah.
It's such a strange thing. During Caldecott Award speeches or starred reviews or social media, it's like, the illustrations are great. Look how wonderful the cover is. The interiors are awesome. Good job, Lane Smith.
Yep. Isn't that a shame? It's, taking that one step further, speaking of reviews and things, a lot of times I'll read reviews of a wonderful book, and 90% of it will be about the text and what a wonderful story. And then in the last line or two, ably complimented by whimsical illustrations of Henrik Drescher or something, and it's like, wait, that's the reason I bought it. It's a picture book. I bought it for the pictures.
Yep.
And less so for the art director. You're exactly right. There have been a few teams like that, Étienne Delessert, Rita Marshall, and but very few. We were lucky because when we started, I wanted our books to look unlike most other kids' books, or just not a cookie cutter design. And at that time, they were sort of, it was much easier. They were just grateful. Oh yeah, Molly can do it as a freelancer. Mm-hmm. Now it's a little more difficult because the publishers are so big, and they have so many people in house, and they have designers and art directors and all those people who get paid to do that. And so it's a little more touchy, and you don't want to step on toes. But I couldn't do any of these books without Molly, because it truly is, we work in tandem. It's throughout the whole process, through the book dummy process, I'll adapt my art to work with some sort of type treatment she wants to do. Yeah. Or I'll finish a dummy and she'll say, you've got all this type floating, and then suddenly you've got this single page illustration with type on the left side, and oh yeah, duh, So, but yeah, no one knows. But when you said you had people in the audience raise their hands, it's the exact reverse. Even with my own family, I would go home and they would say, "Now, Molly, you work with Lane on these books. Do you write them?" No, I design them. I do the text. I mean, anytime you see a word, and I've done that, or the flaps and the end papers and oh, okay. So you do the illustrations with him? No, I do. Yep. I do the words. Well, but you said you weren't the writer. No, oh my God.
Yeah, it's like, I think about what we need to do with the gutter. So you work outside? No. And
exactly.
Concerned with the spine of the book. Are you a doctor?
Yeah. Lane painted an illustration of a field. So you do field work.
Yeah.
Okay, I was trying to add one more to you. That was not very good.
You always have to do those kinds of things in threes.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
I had that same. I mean, my own parents. I mean, I was an art director for 20 years, and my dad, I one time was like, my customers are always asking me what you do, and I don't know. And he was saying it as a way of like, it was my fault that I didn't explain it to him correctly. It's like, I don't know. Right. I don't know what you do. What is it you do? I'm like, I'm an art director. So you write and draw the right pictures? No. You draw the pictures? No. What do you do? I hire illustrators to make art for words that are written by somebody else. And he was like, oh, all right. Okay. I'm like, just tell him I make books. And he's like, okay, that's easy.
Tell him I'm like the great and powerful Oz behind the curtain.
Behind the curtain.
That no one, or I'm the puppet master. Pull the strings.
Yeah. But it's
No,
not like,
it's
we
true.
don't need to, and the Caldecott goes to, so-and-so and their art director. Maybe like that might be a little too far. But I don't know. It's if you look at any Kirkus review or PW review, it's what you just said. It's text.
Yeah.
The text is great. Look at the text. Last sentence with, able illustrations or with, passable illustrations by Maurice Sendak or something. You know what I mean? It's like, what? It's a picture book. Why is the industry not? It's just it's interesting that the illustrations, the pictures, aren't on equal footing with the writing or the design.
I think that speaks more to the fact that 99% of the folks who write books and write books about books and review books are come from a writer background, an academic background, and they're not necessarily visual. Usually, too, we get the designer and the illustrator. A lot of times we'll get short shrift. They'll try to describe it by comparing it to someone else. Lane Smith's new book features a turtle in a John Klassen style. It's like, oh, I love John Klassen, but wait.
Speaking of John Klassen, his work is wonderful. Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah.
And, or I used to get early on, when my weird illustrations would come out, they would say things Picasso-esque. Or I remember once Dilys Evans did a book on children's book creators, and she said, "Oh, you must have liked Keith Haring a lot. I see a lot of Keith Haring in your work." And I said, "No, I actually don't like Keith Haring at all. No offense." And then, when the book came out, like Lane Smith's Keith Haring-like illustration. Like, man, you ran this by me, and I said I don't like this.
Do you read your reviews?
Yes, I do, and I wish I.
Do you always
could
regret
lie
it?
And well, probably like most people, if I'm on Amazon or something, and there's 50 reviews and there are 5-star reviews, and then there's one-star review, that's the one I read. And I'm just a glutton for punishment. And I try not to, but you just can't help it. It's just human nature. Right. But I'm always thrilled when I get an insightful review, even if they don't like the book. And it's rare, but sometimes someone will just, point out something I wasn't even aware of, or So yeah, I'm a nerd who grew up reading the liner notes on album covers, and I read acknowledgement pages in books, and so I do read my own reviews just because that's the way I am. But I regret it because, or if someone loves your book and they give you a rave review, but I think they don't know what are they talking about,
I love her illustrations.
Yeah. Exactly. And her work in Lois and Clark. My cousin Vinny. What a wonderful actor.
She was just a great lawyer in My Cousin Vinny. I mentioned style earlier, and then we got all excited about Tomi the Tiger, and it completely fell out of my head. I'm not breaking any new ground here. You've been asked about the fact that you work in multiple media, multiple styles. You use everything. You literally use everything. Your finger, bubblegum wrappers, newspaper clippings, oil paint, everything. So I'm not really asking anything anyone else hasn't asked. But I want to point this out because working in multiple styles, working in multiple media, this is a very common topic of conversation these days. There are two camps: either work in one medium, work in one style, or you'll confuse art directors. Or the camp that I'm in, to hell with that. You're an artist. Do whatever the heck you want. Just keep it organized.
Right.
Just look at your work for a quick example. Really quick example. The hockey family. The happy hockey. Family, right? Grandpa Green, which is one of my favorite books. Definitely in my top 3. I don't know what the other 2 are, but certainly in my top 3 favorite children's books, period, is Grandpa Green.
Yeah.
And let's go with Sticky Cheese Man, or something, early, like in the 90s. Like, let's go with The True Story of the Three Little Pigs. Just those 3. Just those 3 are completely different in approach. Like, are they so different that you look at one and go like, that was Lane Smith? Maybe not. But other than that, man, they are completely different. And I'm just pointing this out. I don't even really have a question, to be honest with you. I just wanted to point this out and hear your thoughts on this, because it's frustrating. It frustrates me to no end to hear illustrators say to me, oh, well, I did a portfolio review with such and such art director, or I was at a conference, such and such conference, and heard that, no, I shouldn't work in multiple styles. I shouldn't work in multiple media. I should go digital. So what do you think?
Well, for me, the most fun aspect of creating illustration is in the experimentation. So I'll read the text, or if it's something I've written, I immediately start to think of what would be the best way to represent and to showcase the text. And usually that comes through in the textures and the experimentation. If it's a naive text, I might start doing something in colored pencils, or if it demands a more rendered approach, like Grandpa Green with little leaves and all that, I might try different oil techniques where you can get sort of leaf patterns. And so, I think that's what excites me about a book. And it's almost like I'm a character actor, who's doing these different roles. But, when I look at my stuff, maybe I'm fooling myself. But, I kind of think, oh, this all looks like my stuff. But I could see other people saying, well, no, it doesn't. That's like this stinky cheese man. His head's made of cheese. And then you got this, like, story over here. It brought tears to my eyes. It's about death. What the hell? But, the difference, I think, is when I was at art school, there were certain people that they call them dialist style. But those people had many different styles, but there were other people's styles. You'd get someone and it's like, oh, I can draw like R.O. Bleckman, and I could, paint like Bernie Fuchs, and I could, do something that, but I think in my case, they're all different interpretations of a story, but they're all still my style, and there's a lot of variety in there, and I think that goes back to me looking up to the Provensens too. They could do, like their myths and have more geometric shapes, and then they could do something sort of sweet,
like color kittens.
Yeah, exactly. Like mid-century look, and then they'll do something like Aesop's Fables, and it's more like loose drawn with sponge patterns, or however they're creating that stuff in egg tempera. And so I hope my stuff's more like that. I have a book coming out in the spring next year, and it's the best thing I've ever done. And it's for me. It's just kind of thrilling to still feel like I'm learning every day. In every book, I discover something new. And sometimes they don't quite work out, and you're too far into it, or you look at it a year afterwards and you look and think, that book's kind of ugly. But it's thrilling for me to try a whole different technique, or you use a different kind of paint, and then have it turn out. And it's kind of like, that's what I wish I could have been doing 30 years ago. And so I think it just keeps it exciting, selfishly for myself, to always be playing around. I don't think I could. I mean, one of my heroes was Charles Schulz, but I don't think I could have been drawing Charlie Brown for 50 years. Every day the same. I would draw him, but maybe I would, scratch some. Yeah.
Right. You have won several Lifetime Achievement Awards, handful of Caldecott honors, a whole slew of other awards and accolades and all that kind of thing. And I talk to a lot of illustrators who are trying to figure things out for themselves and for their work and for their careers. You said that in your 50s, you felt like you were just getting started in children's books. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah. Yes.
Really?
Yeah. I feel like I wish I could live to be 100 because I feel like I'm getting better with every book. Sometimes I'll do one and it's 2 steps back.
A stinker.
But
yeah.
yeah. And it's usually that's due to some pressure, like deadline pressure. And it's like, and it's like, I wasn't ready. But very rarely, usually the books, even books that completely tank sales-wise, are still some of my favorite books. But I feel like I'm kind of on a roll now. I feel like I did a book this year. You probably haven't seen it yet, but it's Cat Problems. And I feel like that's some of my best illustrations ever. And then the book I have coming out next spring, A Gift for Nana, that's the best book I've ever done in the writing and the story. I feel like my writing is slowly getting where I wanted it to be. But I couldn't have done that 30 years ago. Most kids' books, if you look at them, they're more like novelty books. They're jokey, and then they have a punchline, and probably most of mine are like that too. But I'm just now comfortable enough now that I'm 62. I don't know what it is, but I'm just settling down, and I'm writing, and I'm not ashamed to make something more sentimental and heartfelt. And I've been reading a lot of, so I'll read William Steig and Kate DiCamillo and all these great people who mix in heart and supernatural elements and all that and make it work. And how did they do that? And
right.
It's kind of making sense to me now, but I've always been a late bloomer. I mean, some people are just, right out of the box. Everything they do is great. And I'm just a slow learner, a late bloomer. So yeah, okay. I thought in my 50s I was still learning, and now I'm in my 60s, and I feel like I'm still learning.
Still learning.
But people like William Steig give me hope because he didn't do his first book until I think he was 61 or 62, his first kid's book. So I think I got time. Grandma Moses, when did she start painting? She was already a grandma,
She was 76.
Okay, okay, good one.
And she painted until she was, up until her passing, which was 101.
See, you could go on Jeopardy, and if they would just ask illustration.
Only illustration history, yep.
Yeah. The category is Tony the Tiger. Oh, okay.
Oh, well, let me hold on a second, roll up your sleeves. Did you know? You know who else started late? One of your favorites, Leo Lionni. He was working in advertising, and then he said, I'm out. I'm going to go work in children's books. And I think his first book he was 50.
Wow. I love it. His Swimmy, my favorite book.
Yep.
Children's book. Well, probably a tie with Swimmy and Where the Wild Things Are. Those two are right at the top.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what my top are, but Grandpa Green, man.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I don't want to fanboy. I really don't want to fanboy out, but like, come on. How could you not read Grandpa Green and at the end not cry? If you don't cry, then there's something wrong in the insides. You know what I'm saying? All right.
Well, my wife Molly, when I showed her that I did It's a Book and Grandpa Green the same week, and I showed her to her, and she read It's a Book, and she's like, this was funny. And I said, I don't know if I should leave that jackass line. And she said, if you take out that jackass line, I'm going to divorce you. And I said, okay, we'll leave that in. Then I showed her Grandpa Green, and she read it, and she said, what the hell were you thinking? I said, what do you mean? She goes, what's this? I said, I don't know. It's just, I was thinking of my family, and And
is that? I mean, it's a great grandson basically telling us about his great grandfather's life story through topiary, because the great grandfather was a topiary gardener, and like the image that breaks my heart the most in a good way is the end. And this was the spread, I think, right after when you were explaining to the reader that the reason the great grandfather is losing his memory, and uses the topiaries to sort of make these like tokens of his life. And so the next, and then you're like, oh, that's sweet. Oh, there's the great grandfather. He's alive. Oh my God, that's so cute. And then you turn the page, and then you see like the boy is carving a topiary and it's his great grandfather. And you're like, wait a second. Oh shit, he died. And I'm just like, oh my God. And, God. Come on.
No, I probably get more letters about that book than any, from families and their. Yeah, well, you'll like the gift for Nana, which comes out next, because that was sort of a tribute to my mom, who passed away a couple of years ago, and all the grandkids called her Nana, and that's another sort of tearjerker.
All right, well, I'll look forward to that. So, gosh, I would love to keep talking to you, but we've got to go. So. Let's remember that there are illustrators listening and other folks, but mostly illustrators who, trying to make a go at this, trying to figure things out. What piece of advice would you like to share with them directly?
Well, I understand the business is a lot different now, as we alluded to earlier, when it was much more hands-on and personal, and you could just get an appointment to see an art director. I'm sure now it's all through sending your portfolio and all that. But I think the one thing, the cliche that applies, is just perseverance. You just, if it's what you love, just keep doing it. When I did that Halloween ABC book, that I wasn't commissioned for that. I just was doing a painting a night, and because that's what I love to do. And I just sort of foolishly stuck with illustration, because that's what I love more than anything in the world. And if you love it that much and you're halfway decent, someone, is going to take a chance on you.
If you find value in this podcast, consider becoming a patron. In return, you can access bonus episodes, receive invitations to our Art Directors After Hours series, and get a 10% off discount code for all ID offerings. Become a patron by visiting patreon.com/illustrationdept. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.